Hello, and welcome back to the Nourished with Purpose podcast. It's Bailey, and I hope you're having a great Thursday or whenever you're listening to today's episode. I really did not mean to do a whole month and a half long break from the podcast, but it just really is kind of how things have played out. Life has been full. I'm not going to say busy, but life has been full and just a lot of things going on, but not a lot of going on at the same time. Anyway, just didn't really feel like I had a lot to say or a lot to share. So I am back, hopefully back more consistently now. I know I gave that disclosure early on postpartum. I'm like, okay, I might disappear for a while. I'm coming back. I'm not leaving. But just sitting down to record an episode every week, I feel like the weeks are just flying by. Where it comes to be another Thursday, I'm like, oh my goodness, I haven't recorded a single thing. Last week, I also started recording an episode and it was so chaotic. I will never release that. I actually didn't even finish it, but I started recording it when Oliver was down for a nap. And then when he woke up, by that point, I'm like, I don't even know what I was talking about at this point. So we're just going to start over. We're going to start new. But how are you? I hope you're doing well. It has been such a long time since we've talked. I have been really enjoying those of you that I follow on Instagram, just seeing life outside of, obviously I don't hear back from you, but I think the podcast has just been a good way to connect with people. And I feel like if you've commented or if you shared about the podcast, I know you to some extent, right? I don't know you, but I know you. So it is fun just to see how life is evolving. I feel like there's so much going on for everybody in this season. I feel like even client-wise, I hesitated to even sit down to record today because I'm just like, not maybe feeling the best this week. I physically feel fine, but just emotionally, I think I'm just definitely burning out. And I don't feel like I should be, but I am. And I think I go through these seasons where I'm doing really good. I feel great. And then I have a couple things go wrong and I'm just like, okay, I feel like I'm floundering. And I really feel like, whether it is like no shows for client calls or last minute cancellations or reschedules, like all of that, I feel like I just take on so deeply and so personally, and it's not a personal issue. That's something I've just not yet separated when it comes to business and I don't know, working with people. I've just not separated the two. I am so emotionally invested in everyone that if that doesn't feel reciprocated, I think it's just really hard for me to not feel like I'm failing, even though, and Nathan has told me this week, like you can't care more about people's results than they care about their own results. And that's not negatively talking about any clients I'm working with right now. That's just honestly a general statement that I have to remind myself of. Like, I just can't care more maybe than they do. And that, like I said, it's not nobody in specific, and I'm not upset with anyone or anything like that. But I just think this week has felt heavy because of that and just my lack of ability to separate personal life from work life. It's all just like so integrated into one another. And I think that also makes it hard to want to have hobbies and even just like cooking in the kitchen. I'm like, well, I should record this episode, or I should record this recipe, or I should share what I'm doing, because I do think it's fun. And I think it's fun to just have different resources for clients to utilize. But at the same time, it's like, where do you draw the line? So I think that's probably where I've been at, just very transparently within the last month and a half. The beginning of every month is really always hard for me. And the last couple of months, it's not been. And then this month, I feel like it's now just hitting me like towards the end of the month, which is really just kind of weird timing. But you guys don't need to hear that. You don't need to hear my whole sob story. Let's get into more fun updates, things that are going well. And that's what I also do with clients at the beginning of every call. I'm like, okay, what are some wins over the last couple of weeks? What do you feel good about? What are you proud of yourself for? Because it's so easy to dwell on the negative and the things that aren't going well, and honestly just let that occupy so much space in our brain. But in reality, there's a lot of things going well. We honestly just have to rewire and retrain our brain to think that way. And I think that just gets harder maybe as we get older, or we just feel a little more seasoned in what we're doing. It's hard to see the positive. But positives over the last month, since I have really given you any update, I have started planting my garden. We've had, luckily, some rain over the last couple of days, so I haven't had to be out there watering it, but got tomato plants, pepper plants, one hot pepper plant, green beans, zucchini, butternut squash, and a couple strawberries. I also planted some basil, oregano, and cilantro. So I actually need to go out there today to check up on how things are going and how things are growing, actually, because I feel like with having raised garden beds, things just don't come up quite as well as they did or quite as quickly as they did when I had it like in the ground, in the soil. So I know there's probably some sort of like soil testing that I probably need to do to assess like why are things in one box not really growing and the others are doing fine. Outside of that as well, we've just been getting outside. Something that's been I'm just so happy about is my aunt and uncle are getting rid of their patio furniture. And I told her months ago, I'm like, if you're getting new patio furniture, let me know because I will buy your old patio furniture off of you. And we were able to, I ordered a rug off of Amazon and I have like a little bistro table and then I have that patio furniture. And we got the whole outdoor setup just looking so cute. Obviously, with the weather, we've not been able to enjoy it quite as much, but even just getting outside after a long day of calls or being on my computer, it feels so good to just go out there and sit on our patio furniture, watch the sunset, and it's just something I really want to do so much more this summer, even just with breakfast, is taking breakfast out there and just enjoying it outside because I have, since we've moved to this house, wanted it to create kind of an outdoor space, and patio furniture is just expensive. Also, when you live in the country, nothing stays really clean for very long, so I knew I wanted something secondhand. And finding that on Facebook Marketplace, you just never know what you're getting, where it's coming from. So I was so excited. It's new to me. It feels brand new to me. And I'm just like honestly giddy about what the whole outdoor setup looks like. We also have like a little pergola that was here when we moved. And then we hung some string lights a couple years ago. So it's just very vibey. I think it would be a really fun area to like host people, have people over just to hang out in the evenings now as it's getting nicer outside and things are kind of greening up. One other thing that I did this weekend, actually, when we were headed to see some family and friends, is I put on ChatGPT, which honestly, I don't try to use it that often because I just think of all the gallons of water that one question is probably utilizing just to cool off the AI systems. If you haven't gone down that rabbit hole, neither have I. I've just heard about it and I don't like to think about it. So I'm like, okay, I'm not going to use chat for that many things. But for this, I took a photo of the front of our house and we're trying to decide what we want to do. I feel like this is kind of the year of us redoing the exterior of our home. It definitely is showing that it's 100 years old and they got new siding on the sides of the house when we had a bad storm a few years ago, but they didn't re-side the front of the house. I don't know why. And I just don't know. But we need to, or we want to repaint the foundation of the house and then repaint the front of the house, like the accents and the railing. So I put it into chat, a photo of our house. I'm like, okay, give me like a warm, cozy bungalow style curb appeal house. And what it showed back, I literally can't stop looking at it because I'm like, our house could look like that. That's insane. Our house could look like that. So I'm very determined to make the front of our house look very beautiful this summer or this spring into summer. So it gave me even down to the paint samples that I need from Sherwin-Williams and what the accent colors could be and how to trim the windows. And I was so incredibly impressed with the quality of what it showed. It also had kind of like a path in the front of our house, steps going off the front of our house, which we will do eventually. We plan to actually physically pick up our house, move it onto a new basement, add on an attached garage, master suite, all these things in the next hopefully 5-ish years time frame. But all those little things, I feel like paint can make such a difference. So just painting the base of the house. And we have rock. You guys probably don't care about this, but I'm kind of geeking out because I have such a vision. But we have rock as our mulch. It's not mulch, but it's rock. Worst idea ever. No offense to whoever did this to our house, but it is such a pain to remove and it is so ugly and dry looking and you can't really plant anything because it's just so heavy. So what I'm going to be doing at some point is picking up all of the mulch or the rock, the gravel, that is where our mulch would be. Again, I don't know what you'd call that. Landscaping rock is probably what you would officially say. And I'm going to plant some hydrangeas in the front of our home, and then do some like green plants. I don't know. I just want it to look very like cozy, warm. I know it's going to have to grow, and it's hard because eventually it's all probably going to be pushed into a hole when we move the house. But if we can do it even for like $500, we can do all this. Like, I would be so happy. And our house really needs it. I feel like the inside of our house has gotten so much attention in the last few years, with renovating our kitchen and our bathroom, and even doing like Oliver's room and our room, that just the exterior needs a little love. So that is the goal this spring into summer, is to do that. And like I said, uploading a photo of the house into chat was just, it blew my mind. I'm like, how is it able to do this? And just, it was beautiful, truly beautiful. So I'm going to try to mimic that in a way. And then obviously understand, like, I won't fully be able to do that because we're not going to fully paint our whole house. What else has been going on? Oh, okay. Coffee cart updates, because if you've been listening for a bit, you know, I have started a coffee cart, and I really am just honestly enjoying so much of it, so many different aspects of it. But I have a pop-up this weekend, and it's like a Pilates event. Then afterwards, girls can come get a coffee and shop at a boutique. And I am giddy for this event. It is going to be so much fun. If you are in Kearney, Nebraska, or anywhere close, you should definitely check it out. Go to my profile, Camp Coffee Cart, on Instagram, and you'll see the post. It has like a American flag vibe because it is Memorial Day weekend. So we will be set up there this weekend, and I've been looking forward to it for so long. May, that's actually the last event I'll do in May. And then June, I could have one more potential opening in June. Otherwise, we're fully booked for June. July is still open. August, potentially another couple events. So it's kind of crazy how things just flow and how things just happen, how opportunities just happen. I remember in May when I started this, I really didn't have a lot on my calendar for June. And I was like, oh my goodness, like, what's June going to look like? How am I going to be able to, like, you know, have events? And do I need to like do some outreach? And anyway, and then all of a sudden June was full. So I think it's just something that I have realized is very special and very unique to this area. It's something that there is interest in, which is just always good to see and good to hear. I'm really enjoying it. And if you can hear this, which I'm sure you can, it's a little ASMR. I made the Bananas Foster latte. I did call it banana bread latte, so don't be confused. Bananas Foster is what I'm officially going to name it on the menu, because it does have a little bit of cinnamon and vanilla bean paste in it. So instead of like the banana bread latte or banana milk latte, it's just a little bit more rich, and not in a bad way, not like an overly sweet way. It is honestly just perfect, and it's going to be officially added to our menu. So long term, you can get this at any time on our menu. I'm sipping on it now. I've been sipping on it for the last like 3 days, and I told Nathan there is just like no latte better than this. It might even be my favorite more than the salted maple, which is probably our second, well, probably our first most popular aside of the seasonal drink. So for May, it's the carrot cake latte with a maple cream cheese cold foam. June is going to be raspberry crisp and cream. So it's going to be like a vanilla bean base with a raspberry cold foam. So kind of like vanilla ice cream and raspberry crisp. So excited for that one. And then I don't know obviously what the next months are going to be, but those are always our top sellers because the cold foam I think just gets people because it's so darn good. But outside of that, definitely our most popular is salted maple. So having events like this weekend to pop up at is honestly just what I've kind of dreamed about, is girly, cutesy things. That's where I want to be popping up. Bridal showers, baby showers, weddings, all of it. Give me all of it, because it is just so special, and it's so special to be able to serve you. And yeah, just book my calendar full of things like that. I definitely have had to figure out how committed I want to, not committed, but how busy I want to be, just because that does take up my weekends. And so I want to be able to be at home as well and present when I'm at home. Luckily, my schedule allows me to have like Thursday, Fridays, mostly with no client calls. So I can just focus on being at home. That's kind of my weekend, but it is hard to, like, when everybody else is enjoying a weekend and you're working, it is hard to wrap your head around like, no, I do have a couple days that are like my weekend. It just doesn't always look like everybody else's. So I would say those are probably the most exciting things going on right now. Outside of that, just busy, obviously, with the client work that I do. And that's exactly what I'm going to talk to you about today. Not client work, but an aspect of that, which is working with women with PCOS, which is now labeled PMOS. Now, you might have seen this shift, and I'm going to dive into what this means and honestly, maybe my personal opinion on all of this. Not to add more noise, but I think if you have been diagnosed with PCOS in the past, or you suspect that you have PCOS, obviously I always tell clients, make sure you go to the doctor, have them assess what's going on. Even if I can look at blood work, look at your symptoms, I can maybe suspect that something is happening, but I cannot diagnose anything legally. So I don't even address that. But I typically would tell clients, like, you need to go get an ultrasound and see if there are any cysts on your ovaries to then officially be diagnosed with PCOS. But it does get confusing because you can have PCOS with no cysts on your ovaries. And really that is why I had no part of this, why they made the change to label it PMOS. So PCOS stands for polycystic ovary syndrome. PMOS is polyendocrine metabolic ovarian syndrome. So obviously PMOS, the shift. But I wanted to record today's episode to talk about what you do if you've been diagnosed with PCOS or PMOS. I keep wanting to say PSOM, so please forgive me if I do not pronounce it right, but PMOS, I don't know how I'm going to refer to it. One or the other, it means really the same thing, but not at the same time. It's just the name change. What you're going to do if you have been diagnosed with this, because I think it gets really overwhelming, really daunting. Your options are very limited. Typically, if you're in the doctor's office, and it's not often a root cause approach to how to address it. And that's fine. Like I have said many times, and I even wrote over on my Substack about this, the safest form of care for you is what you feel the most comfortable with. Now, I say the same with childbirth, right? The safest place for a woman to deliver her baby is where she feels the most safe. For me, that would not be within my household. That would be at a hospital with very low to no intervention. Now, that's not the case for everyone, right? So it's kind of the same thing here. If you feel the best about managing it with birth control or GLP-1, that is your decision. Ultimately, I'm not here to sway your decision, but I'm here to just give you a different perspective and different options when it comes to how you actually support PCOS or PMOS after you get the diagnosis, okay? So just like with any syndrome is kind of the word that they use to not really ever fully understand what is going on, right? So PCOS has had very, very limited research in the past. Even for me to look at clinical research or read books about PCOS, there are slim to none. And I think a big reason for that is because there is very, very little clinical research on what PCOS is, why women get PCOS, and how to actually address it long term. Typically, if you're going to go to the doctor's office and you get the diagnosis, what I appreciate is when I'm working with clients when they get the diagnosis, is they're already taking a root cause approach to what's going on. If you already have cysts present with PCOS, you can't necessarily reverse PCOS or PMOS. However, you can really get it to a point where I would say remission is almost the word I would use, or to a point where you're not noticing the symptoms. So this means you don't have painful irregular periods. You ovulate normally. You don't have male pattern hair growth. We get testosterone down or DHEAS down. We get just your metabolic health. You start losing weight, or you don't feel really sick and throw up every time you get a period because you're so uncomfortable. Instead, we get it to be more manageable. And I definitely do believe that is possible. I have seen it be possible among clients, which is why I believe that. But it does take time, and it takes a lot of discipline. And so through what I talk about today, I ultimately think if you have guidance for all of this, whether it's me, whether it's somebody else, doesn't matter, just get some guidance if you are not wanting to go the traditional healthcare route and how they would approach PCOS or PMOS. I do think, and I highly encourage you to find somebody that you like, know, and trust to guide you in this area, right? Because I will not claim to know everything about everything. There are a lot of things that I don't know, right? I have never been diagnosed with PCOS, so I can't relate as closely to you in that sense, but I do know a lot about it, and I know a lot about metabolic health and how we can support the body in other ways. So like I said, find somebody to guide you through it and support you through this both emotionally and also physically, because I think there's a lot of fear around this diagnosis, a lot of concerns like with even conception or honestly, I think that's probably the number one. Or the two things that I would probably say here the most is like, yeah, I got diagnosed with PCOS and my doctor told me that when we want to have kids, it's probably going to be really hard to conceive naturally. The other piece of this is, yep, I have PCOS. My doctor told me it could be really, really hard for me to lose weight. And both of those narratives, I think we can really work ourselves up in our mind to believe something so wholeheartedly if it's what we hear over and over and over again, right? Even if your doctor is not telling you that directly every single time you go in for an appointment, it's probably something that comes to your mind when you are intimate with your husband, or when you are even just on a diet and you're trying to, not a diet technically, but you're eating differently and you're like, okay, I'm doing all these things, but I know like because I have PCOS, I'm going to struggle to lose weight. It's just what we continue to narrate in our own minds and tell ourselves. And there is legitimacy to a sliver of that, right? Like I'm not here to say, oh yeah, it's so easy to lose weight. I think anybody over the age of 25 has probably experienced at some point like an inability to lose weight, or maybe they've noticed rapid weight gain. And I guess I shouldn't say anyone, but I know I definitely have. I've had moments where it feels like it's impossible to lose weight. And I've also had moments where I've gained all this weight. And in the moment, I didn't understand why. Now looking back, if I look at myself very critically, I 112% can see why that happened. But in the moment, it feels like it's happening to you and that you're not responsible for any of it, when oftentimes there is some responsibility that we have to take on with that. Okay, so let's kind of backtrack a little bit. So to get diagnosed with PCOS, obviously we've talked about, now it's PMOS, you have to have 2 of 3 conditions typically in order to get this diagnosis. So the first one is irregular ovulation. So this is going to show up as an irregular menstrual cycle or a lack of, right? So completely losing your period, maybe it comes, you're spotting a little bit off and on. I would say period loss is probably what I see most often. And getting that back is obviously what I'm very then focused on with those clients, because our period is very key, although it might be annoying because, it's just a little bit more high maintenance that week of your period. Your period is a sign that your body is able to and ready to carry life. If your body doesn't feel safe, again, I lost my period for 6+ months the first year when Nathan and I got married. Your body, when it doesn't feel safe, typically then you're going to lose your period. And that's something too where it is such a rebuilding phase, because once you've lost your period and then you get your period back, you really have to be on alert with when you're stressed, if you're eating enough, how your sleep is, what your blue light exposure looks like, regulating circadian rhythm. There are so many pieces of that where, yeah, you get your period maybe back for 1 month, but I'm more concerned about the next month after that, and the month after that, and the month after that, because we're building resilience within the body, right? In order for your body to consistently have a cycle or consistently have a period, that menstrual phase, we really need to understand how our body is being impacted by our environment. So by what we're eating, how we're managing stress, maybe occupation. There's so many pieces of that, both, like I said, emotionally and physically, that weigh into it. So we have to create resilience. The second piece to get diagnosed would be having multiple cysts on your ovaries discovered via ultrasound. You really have to have that ultrasound to know if there's cysts on your ovaries. So that one is pretty key. Have to go to a healthcare facility for that one. And then hyperandrogenism, seen as typically high testosterone levels via blood work. DHEAS is something that we also can see. If you ever looking at blood work, it's DHEA, all caps, -S. So I call it like DHEA sulfate. That is something where if you're looking at that marker, we can sometimes see that elevated, especially if there is hair growth like on your chin or armpits, or you just notice like your body, like above your upper lip, you're growing hair quickly and in areas where typically it's maybe a little bit thicker, coarse, like I said, that male pattern hair growth. So those are pieces there. With that, we can also see estrogen or progesterone be on the lower side. So the hormones are hard because if you've been diagnosed with PCOS or you suspect you have it and you're on birth control, it gets really difficult to look at your hormones via blood work as a true picture of what's going on. Birth control definitely influences that and impacts those markers, so it's not always as accurate. So that's why, again, I always encourage somebody, regardless of if you're not on birth control or you are, to go to primary care. Either get the diagnosis so you have an answer, or if you are like, I don't really need a diagnosis, I want to fix and support the symptoms I'm experiencing, that's also something you definitely can do. So this criteria makes a lot of sense, but I do think that just within the healthcare space, doctors for a long time have struggled to fully understand PCOS and how we treat it effectively and efficiently. Like I said, it's not something that can go away, especially once those cysts are present, but you can support it to the point where you don't notice it. Typically, if you're going into a healthcare facility and you get this diagnosis, they're going to recommend birth control probably as your number one form of treatment. With PCOS, oftentimes they say, like, if you're able to, or I guess maybe their logic is if you're able to stop a typical cycle from occurring, you can prevent the symptoms that are coming with this diagnosis, right? So if we can just shut off your body's cycle in a way, right, where we're never actually having the bleeding phase of our cycle, we're able to really control the symptoms, but not fix the root cause of why the symptoms are there in the first place. So that is something where I think I really, and I'm going to be honest in it, I know that this is probably not what everybody wants to hear and might get some backlash, but I just don't think that birth control should really ever be used. There are very few instances that I've seen where, like, you have severe case of endometriosis where birth control can be supportive temporarily as you work on supporting other areas of your health. This doesn't mean that I am judgmental for people on birth control, using birth control. I understand it. I understand why people get on it. Maybe it's for, like, they don't want to conceive or they're just trying to manage symptoms. I fully understand that when your symptoms are so unmanageable or they feel unmanageable and they feel untreatable, to just get on something to remove and wipe them away temporarily is very appealing. However, the problem is at some point, if you want to have a kid in the future, preconception health-wise, you're going to have to get off birth control. And what that then does is it kind of throws your body into what I would call like second puberty, where you're re-understanding your body, you're relearning your cycle, you're trying to get your cycle back, you're trying to find a pattern with your cycle and even with ovulation, right? So that's where it gets really murky is when okay, in the future I want to have a child, so I'm going to have to get off birth control at some point. So I think to manage something like PCOS with birth control seems a little backwards to me because, again, we're not looking root cause approach or even just lifestyle, dietary wise, what can we do to support this diagnosis supplementally versus putting a Band-Aid on top of it, knowing at some point you're going to be getting off of that topical not topical, but you know what I mean, off of that form of treatment and then have to relearn everything and re-understand your body and probably go through those same feelings that you were feeling when you got the diagnosis all over again. That is my concern with the birth control method. My other concern with us changing PCOS to PMOS, although I think it is great leaps and bounds for women's health, just in how we actually understand the female body. And I feel like a lot of people were so confused because they wouldn't have cysts on their ovaries, but they were diagnosed with PCOS. So like, how do you make that make sense? Because it's not a cystic issue. Well, PMOS is more focused on metabolic health. And this is something that I would wholeheartedly agree with and I feel very aligned with, is if I look at somebody's blood work who has, again, previous diagnosis of PCOS, suspected PMOS, we will typically see fasting glucose and fasting insulin and their C-reactive protein inflammatory marker elevated. Okay, so we can see that there is some sort of blood sugar dysregulation, patterns of insulin resistance, honestly 10 out of 10 times. There's probably not been a case with PCOS where I've not seen those markers out of range. Now, the thing with that is obviously this is showing this is a metabolic issue. When those markers are not within optimal range, right? So maybe functional medicine range, they're not optimal. Traditional, they are fine. The ranges are a lot more narrow when it comes to functional testing, just because we're holding your body to a higher standard and we're honestly asking more of your body, right? We're looking at things before they even become a concern. So with insulin resistance, yep, like I would say that would be a pattern that might be very common when we're looking at somebody's blood work that also has PCOS. That is really where I do think that the name change is very beneficial for women, because they're looking at it, again, metabolic issue or metabolic stress on the body. They're not looking at it from a solely cystic issue. And it is kind of, I guess, an issue or symptom. So my concern with the change from PCOS to PMOS is because GLP-1s are all the rage right now. I have seen people that should not be on them. I've seen even somebody, and I should backtrack, having a pattern of insulin resistance come back within blood work does not mean that you are going to be type 2 diabetic, right? That's not the transition. This is that precursor. It's like, okay, blood sugar markers, we need to support blood sugar a little bit differently. We need to support stress a little bit differently, because what you're doing right now is not really effective, right? Typically, then we're going to look at like sodium, potassium, chloride, calcium, and see those markers are not within great range. We see some adrenal stress. So how can we ultimately support the body in that area so that we don't have issues later on in the future, right? So we're all about preventative medicine, preventing any issue from occurring in the future, any diagnosis. But you can be underweight and still have patterns of insulin resistance, right? Not eating enough carbs, having extreme amounts of stress are all going to impact the body, right? In some way or another. So those two markers, along with C-reactive protein, are not just influenced by physical stress, but also emotional stress. Things like anxiety, depression, we can definitely see influence those markers as well. And so that's where this shift to PMOS, I feel like it's getting us out of the birth control, because I feel like, and maybe it's not as corrupt as I think it is, but I just feel like I know a little too much to obviously not say that your doctor is ever intentionally doing something to harm you. I do not ever believe that, and I would never ever say that. Your nurse practitioner, whoever you're working with, I don't think any of it comes from ill intent, right? But I do think the pharmaceutical industry is maybe catching on that women are getting off birth control because their body does not feel right. They don't feel right. Maybe girls are more focused on that preconception phase. They really want to take care of their body well without medications. And so they're like, okay, I'm going to get off birth control. So they're losing customers there. But the GLP-1 craze is out of control. We're getting commercials. We're getting influencers. We're getting sports whatever. Serena Williams is talking about Roe and her GLP-1 experience, and Shaq is talking about his GLP-1 experience on Roe, and it's just too much. The noise is so loud. I get emails myself from different companies saying that they want to offer me a microdosed prescription of a GLP-1 to then talk about to my audience. I've probably got that email 10 times from 5 different companies. So it is prevalent, and there is very few regulations around it, right? If you want it, you can probably get it. Now, that is where my concern lies, because I think we're going to see a shift from prescribing birth control to then prescribing a GLP-1 to support PCOS. And ultimately, what that's going to do is it's going to help your body to some extent medically. It's going to support fasting insulin, fasting glucose. It will do that. You might even notice weight loss, which I would say is probably the primary reason most people are taking it. And that is all something that you have to make the decision around, right? I'm not trying to influence you that one thing is really bad or one thing is a much better option, but I just find concern anywhere where we are, instead of getting to the root cause of an issue, we are putting and masking it with something else, either birth control, GLP-1. I think we are just going to continue to see the rise in prescription of GLP-1s when PCOS or PMOS is diagnosed, because it's just the next best thing, right? The next best thing to offer. your patient or your client. So that is where my concern lies. That's where I have hesitation, not necessarily judgment, but hesitation. I've seen a few cases where birth control, like I said, can be helpful temporarily, and few cases where a GLP-1 microdosed can be helpful temporary. But that's the thing, is once you get on a GLP-1, you're typically not getting off, right? Getting off of something like that, there are so many symptoms that come with it, and you can't just cold turkey, right? You have to taper off of it. The different forms of that medication are going to impact your body differently, whether it's Mounjaro, tirzepatide, or Ozempic. Your body's going to respond differently to all three of them. So that's where it just gets tricky, and I think a long-term prescription of anything raises concern. And even if you maybe, I don't know how to approach that. I'm just saying it should raise concern that anything would be prescribed long-term. I think the goal, and my goal with the clients that I work with, is not that they are even working with me forever. I want you to work with me for maybe 6 months, maybe some clients a little bit longer if they want that accountability, but I'm not here to create dependence, right? You should feel empowered and to be independent in how you take care of your body, how you nourish your body, how you fuel your body, how you supplement. It's that empowerment that's important to me. It's not about me getting all this money from you for the rest of your life, which is where a lot of these medications fall, in my opinion, right? I'm getting money from you for the rest of your life, or from your insurance company for the rest of your life. And that's, fine and dandy temporarily, but I just have a lot of concern long-term around what that looks like. So if you are listening and you're like, okay, yep, I've been diagnosed with PCOS, PMOS. Again, I know that name change is annoying. I have to kind of say both. But if you've been diagnosed, I'm going to walk through where I would recommend you start in treating something like this, okay? So this is going to be personalized to anyone, right? If you're getting one-on-one long-term accountability and support, this is going to probably look different. Every client I work with, their protocol looks different. There is no copy and paste method for me. Everything is approached differently. However, these are general ways that you can start to support this diagnosis. And it's definitely going to be different if you are fresh off of birth control. If you're fresh off of birth control, there is probably more supplementation that we're going to integrate because your body is depleted, especially when it comes to B vitamins. So we're going to want to increase that with maybe like a methylated B vitamin complex, something to support that loss that is present just because you are on something that suppresses production and just honestly depletes B vitamins within the body. So that is what birth control can do. So I have listed out 6 things that you can do to support PCOS, and this is not the extent of the list, but this is just where I would recommend you get started. So you get the diagnosis, you're like, okay, I don't know what to do, I don't know how to approach this. This is where I would encourage you to begin. First and foremost, obviously, like I said, finding somebody to guide you through this. As much as I can tell you what to do, the accountability and the continued support is unmatched. I have looked for coaches in the future and had them myself because there's just something different about having somebody hold you to what you need to do and advances your protocol as you progress. So number 1 is reducing stress. Every client, I think, gets annoyed when I say this because we're all stressed. What do we do about it? But we cannot just ignore it at this point. Your body is telling you, hey, maybe you had a very stressful situation that this is stemming from. Maybe you whatever. I think there's a lot of things that we could say maybe PCOS stems from. I would say oftentimes a pattern I see is a very, very high stress situation occurs, and then typically a diagnosis follows not so long after. I'm not here to say that situation caused this, but maybe just irritated the body enough to get to kind of like what I would call like the tipping point where, okay, our body's more susceptible to stress at this point. Our body is dysregulated, it's depleted, we need support. So reducing stress. So what this would look like would be like blue light exposure, getting morning sun, especially supporting, just looking at the sun before you look at your phone in the mornings, not just for PCOS, but for digestive reasons. We really want to get your body moving and grooving, right? We want to start the day in a way that's going to support metabolism. So we're eating right away in the morning within that 30 to 60 minutes of waking up, at least 30 grams of protein, something really high protein, especially in the morning. We also want to look at our emotional burden and setting boundaries. If there's emotional things going on, work things going on, really addressing those is pretty key, even though that's maybe not the most enjoyable part. talking through that or working with somebody like a therapist, or even just with what I do, I will give clients different prompts to work through on their own independently, just so they can emotionally process what's going on and kind of assess like, how should I handle this? How do I need to move forward? Brain dumping is also really, I think, a very helpful tool as well. So just dumping everything out in your brain on a piece of paper, letting it just flow. It doesn't need to be polished. It doesn't need to be perfect. You can cuss, you can scream, you can be upset, and then ripping it up, crumbling it up, ripping it up, throwing it away. Very effective in just releasing whatever maybe your body is holding. The second piece of this is removing caffeine and supporting your adrenals instead. I know caffeine is all the craze. Getting a coffee, going for a walk, getting a coffee is all the thing, but you can order decaf coffee. There maybe is a little bit of caffeine in that, but we need to support our adrenals. Our body is functioning in a state of depletion at this point. So we really want to make sure that we are not fueling that depletion with caffeine, especially if you have a dysregulated nervous system, anxiety, depression. It can just be irritated even more, or I shouldn't say irritated. It can be influenced even more when we're doing a lot of caffeine or any caffeine throughout the day. So maybe 50 milligrams. I know even for myself, just from a nervous system standpoint, I cannot handle more than 50 grams, and even 50 grams makes me feel a little bit off. So really pause it on the caffeine and supporting adrenals instead. The thing is you should not need caffeine to stay awake or to have energy. The sign that your body is dependent on caffeine is also a sign that your adrenals are exhausted, that there is adrenal fatigue. So if we support the adrenals, we're going to have natural energy without the need for dependence on caffeine. So again, I work through with clients on what that could look like, but electrolytes would be a good place to start. The third one, getting good sleep and focusing on how you bookend the day. So not laying in bed and scrolling before bed, putting your phone away. Maybe like for me, I have an 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. rule where I'm not looking at my phone. Am I perfect at that every single time? Absolutely not. But I also have red light glasses. So they're glasses with a red lens to block out any blue light. Just because I'm on a screen all day, I know that my body cannot handle that after I'm done working. So shutting the laptop, getting outside, seeing the sun, even if we're watching TV in the evenings, which is something Nate and I do together, I wear my glasses. It just does not then overactivate the brain. That's the thing about blue light, is it is overactivating the brain, underactivating the body. So if you're starting your day looking at your phone, you're already starting in a state of stress. You are spiking cortisol with something synthetic versus getting outside and letting the sun or the natural blue haze in the sky, I don't know if it was a blue haze, the tint in the sky is going to be geared more towards blue when the sun is coming up and before it's fully risen. So it's also just a way for your body to naturally, gradually wake up without being jolted out of bed. So good sleep is so key here. Maybe taking something like magnesium glycinate if you need it to get good restful sleep. But I really think a lot of the stress on the adrenals, emotional stress, stems a lot from maybe comparison or just how the phone impacts us. At least with nearly everybody I've worked with, there has been some sort of not optimal habit around phone usage. And again, I'm not saying that's the cause of any diagnosis, but it just is something that contributes to those symptoms, that if we're able to find some boundary around that and just regulate our usage of that, I think a lot of other things can resolve. Number 4 is focusing on stabilizing foods. So instead of, like I said, caffeine, sugar, typically we are removing or just minimizing the consumption of things that are either going to cause inflammation or just overactivate the body. That's where HTMA testing is really helpful, because we can look at your metabolic type to see how your body is functioning. And so we can see metabolically, like if you have a slow metabolic type, your body is much more sensitive to caffeine and sugar and carbs. Not necessarily carbs like grain-based carbs, but more of like the flour-based. Well, I guess that would still be grain. I don't know what I'm trying to say. You know, like the rice, the quinoa. It would be more of like the cookies and the muffins and the breads that your body is a little more sensitive to. Along with this, we are focusing on protein paired with a fat. So protein and fat I always view as stabilizing foods, and then cooked fiber. Now, we don't want to go overboard on the fat. I think oftentimes we think, okay, yep, I need a good amount of fat to support hormone production and honestly even just get your cycle back. And that's very true. For a period of time, if you're getting off birth control, you might need to have a higher fat diet. However, we don't really want to stay there because there is some metabolic stress happening. So we don't want to be full high fat everything. We want to reduce fat consumption, be more focused on like lean fats, omega-3 fats, not necessarily like a fatty meat along with a lot of cheese and a lot of dairy. I'm never one to say like we need to completely remove anything, but for a period of time, sometimes it is helpful to just reduce consumption of that. So if you're doing protein, cooking some cooked vegetables, obviously steaming vegetables with a little bit of like olive oil, avocado oil, butter, ghee, some salt, really good. Green foods are going to be rich in folate. Definitely something our body always needs more of, especially if we want that consistent cycle. So green, leafy greens, green foods, they're also going to support the liver, which is key for just detoxifying. And so we want to make sure that that is also functioning efficiently as well. So things that stabilize, focus on those stabilizing foods, especially that 30 grams of protein within 30 minutes of waking up, even walking after meals, gentle movement. This kind of comes along with reducing stress, but we just don't want anything that's going to be too hard on the body. So we're maybe strength training, lifting heavy, or going for a walk after meals to support blood sugar. We just really want to do activities, again, that are going to, I always say, like, feel like a hug to the body. We don't need to just like hate our body because we have this diagnosis and now we don't know what to do. We just need to treat our body like it wants to be cared for. It's a really, really, really important piece there. And then lastly, well, not lastly, the last couple, assessing micronutrient need. That's where HTMA testing and blood work really comes in. I honestly don't work with clients if we don't have HTMA or blood work anymore at this point, just because I really think it's so necessary to see what's happening internally and to just make a protocol based around what's happening internally. So 2 tests that I really rely a lot on, if there's a lot of GI stress, maybe a GI map would be a good thing to add in just so we can see, okay, if this is a metabolic issue, we don't want to slow things down with a GLP-1 because that could cause like fermentation within the gut. We can see things like candida, yeast, bacterial overgrowth, just because things slow down within the digestive tract. But instead, is there something like that already present that needs to be addressed that we can work through? Or, like I said, my first 2 options are always HTMA and blood work. HTMA is really great for looking at cellular health and metabolic function, so we can see all of those micronutrient deficiencies and how the body is maybe showing us a symptom because that's not present. Blood work is going to show more organ function, how things are working together. And if we see a deficiency within blood work, we know it really needs to be assessed because our body is primarily going to pull from the tissues, right? So it's going to pull all of those nutrients, micronutrients, vitamins, minerals from the tissues, and then it's going to pull it from the blood when we're not able to get an adequate amount from the tissue. So that's where they go hand in hand and can be really effective, and just also giving you like a long-term meal plan too, because there is an eating style that really, I think with PCOS, it's very specific to your metabolic type, right? It's not so much like, okay, this person did gluten-free and dairy-free, let me remove those foods. Honestly, the reason they probably feel so great is because they were overdoing it in the first place, or maybe with the dairy, they're lactose intolerant and they don't know it, or they have a gluten sensitivity and they don't know it, or they were consuming a lot of dairy, a lot of high-fat foods, and then they removed it and lost weight. Well, yeah, you're removing a piece that was contributing to probably a lot of your calories throughout the day. So there's also reasons why removing dairy and gluten can be helpful. I do think everything in moderation is typically ideal when it comes to things that maybe there's a little bit more varying opinions around, like sugar, dairy, gluten, soy products, right? So there's legitimacy there, but I don't think complete removal of anything is always necessary unless your body, like there's a known sensitivity, or for health reasons, or by looking at the GI map, we see things that are like, okay, yeah, you're going to do better without gluten. Let's remove that for a period of time. Definitely things that you can see, but at the root of it, I don't think your food is always the root cause, right? That it's not the root cause. It contributes to symptoms, but if we can support diet and just eat in a way that aligns with what your body needs metabolically, I think we can see a lot of things trend in the right direction. And lastly, supplement with what you know you need versus making assumptions on what you think you need. So I have done a lot of research around myoinositol recently. I feel like that's something where I will say if it's something that's really popular, I'm typically not one to jump on the train. Even I know in the healthcare setting, they recommend that pretty often, maybe in combination with birth control. But I think outside of that, taking myoinositol, I do think it is effective, and I do think it's a good supplement. Again, I just have hesitations if there's so much popularity around something. I'm like, okay, like what do we know about this? I like it in its most pure form. There's also moments where you're going to see on supplements that they pair it with D-chiro or chiro, however you want to pronounce it. And I have seen other studies show that that can then reduce estrogen within the body. I really think myoinositol in its primary form or pure form is sufficient. You don't need a lot of all the other things you're going to add to it. So I know like Thorne has ovarian care, and I want to say they add like magnesium to it, myoinositol, D-chiro, or chiro. I'm really not the best at pronouncing things properly all the time. And some other pieces, maybe vitamin D. And although I think supplementation with those things can be helpful, I do, like I said, just like it in its pure form. And that might not be best for everybody, right? Of course, I would want to look at what's happening within the body, would want to look at blood work, would want to just hear symptom-wise what's going on. But pairing that with maybe like a really good prenatal, if you're in that stage of life, would be a good option. So magnesium glycinate, like we talked about, that before bed can support sleep. So there's ways that we can make supplementation beneficial, but I always believe it needs to be specific to you and specific to what the body's showing. There are obviously supplements, so many on the market where it's like, yep, okay, this is proven. Here's the stack that somebody's using to support PCOS or PMOS. Let me just copy and paste and take that as well. Okay, yeah, like I see beef liver is another one. There's one, what is the brand? The marketing is awful, but it's really popular. I feel like within a certain niche of women, and it's a beef liver supplement that just completely reversed somebody's PCOS, and they lost 40 pounds before their wedding day within 2 months, and all of those like catch your attention type of marketing schemes. Oftentimes, if there is any sliver of truth to that, it's because they're supporting deficiencies that were present in the body, right? And if we do blood testing, if we do HTMA, we see that. If we do gut testing, we can see how the gut is actually influencing other symptoms. So all of those things together really are optimal and ideal. It gets expensive to get testing done. So if you can utilize primary care, HTMA is very cost effective. But I just would really encourage to do some sort of testing because like I said, I can tell you all the things to do. I can give you a list of 6 things to focus on. But at the end of the day, I don't know you. I don't know your personal health history. Maybe you do all these things perfectly and there's more digging that needs to be done. That's then where we can look at different areas of your health. And maybe it's not because of PCOS that you have a certain symptom. There is something like, I'm not even going to get an example. I don't even know what I would say, but there's something maybe stemming within the gut that actually needs more attention than even, right, what we might think is going on. So there's a lot of layers is what I'm trying to say. I'm not saying it very eloquently, but there are so many layers to how we take care of the body, and how you take care of your body needs to be specific to you. I wholeheartedly believe that, especially with supplementation, it needs to be specific to you. So that is why I do the work that I do. That is why I am so passionate about preconception health specifically, and just making sure that women are supporting their body well before they even want to have a kid, even if that's 6 to 12 months to years down the road. Anytime we have a cycle, so for me, I got my period in 5th grade. Lucky me, I know. I got in 5th grade, so I know, okay, even in 5th grade, instead of just having a very uncomfortable period, which I had until I was probably like, honestly, a freshman in college, it was just uncomfortable. The whole week would wipe me out. For me, I did not choose to go the birth control route, but I know oftentimes, like with the painful period, you'll get on birth control to support your period and support your cycle. Like I said, I've said many times, I think that's more of like that Band-Aid approach. Obviously, the root cause of that was that I was eating like crap, not eating enough, overexerting too much energy and not feeling with enough food. I'm sure I was deficient in something because I wasn't supplementing. I was also drinking a lot of caffeine at that time, eating late at night, not sleeping well, on my phone, talking to probably my boyfriend at the time until like 1 a.m., right? There's so many things there that I was just not doing right. And I can say that now. Even when I was a freshman in college and I was like, I'm gaining all this weight and I don't know why. I exercise. Well, I was still eating way more calories than I was burning. So yeah, I was working out every single day, but intake wise, I was eating way too much food. I was eating fast food late at night. I was going to get ice cream, going to get donuts. I was eating greasy cafeteria food. I was drinking alcohol, which is something I'd never done before. So like all of those pieces were exactly why I was gaining so much weight. When I fixed those areas and I actually acknowledged that I was not doing everything perfectly, which I can say wholeheartedly now, I never am doing everything perfectly because that's impossible. Perfection isn't the goal, but consistency is. Say that over and over and over again. I can now see like, oh yeah, there were a lot of gaps in my lifestyle and my diet that led to that. And that's not me saying you need to be hypercritical of how you're addressing things now, especially if you have this diagnosis. I want you to take a second and take a couple deep breaths or 10 and just understand that this does not mean that there is something chronically wrong with your body, right? Our body was created to be resilient. If we treat our body with care and we treat our body accordingly and we treat our body like God has designed for us to treat our body, you can get through this. And there, I just don't know how to stress enough that there is nothing chronically wrong with you, right? Because I think oftentimes when we get a diagnosis, we think like there's something chronically wrong with me. There's something wrong with my body. I've done all these things wrong. I am so mad at myself because I didn't do these things right, or I'm so mad at myself because I got on this medication. Or we can rack our brains for hours and try to find the one cause of why this is happening to us, but it is going to be exhausting. And at the end of the day, does it really matter if we don't respond, right? So don't be too hard on yourself. And I hope that this episode did not make you feel self-conscious or even judgmental of your own self if you've been diagnosed with something like this, but instead just gave you kind of a different maybe perspective or some guidance in how to address this, right? Because what any diagnosis tells you is that there are areas where you can just support your body differently. And instead of viewing that as an overwhelming and daunting experience, and it's okay if it feels overwhelming at first, if it feels daunting at first, it probably does. But there are things that you can do to support your body and maybe find some joy in that, right? Like I can spend knowing this now, right? It gives me a lot of answers for why I'm having the symptoms I am, why I'm feeling the way that I do. Now I'm going to actively be finding the tools to help me manage this. I'm going to dedicate the next 6 months towards supporting my body in a way like I never have before. And I'm going to be disciplined, I'm going to be consistent, and I'm just going to see how my body responds to that. And I will tell you time and time again, just giving your body time is the most healing thing you can do for it. Giving your body time, gradually introducing habits that are helpful, and not putting so much pressure on perfection can be so key in this entire healing process. So all of that to say, I am thinking of you. I am here for you. If you ever need to talk through it or you need somebody to listen, I would be honored to be that person. And honestly, just listen to what's going on, what you're trying, what you're doing, what's working, what's not working. My whole job day to day is honestly problem solving for clients, finding the most effective way to support their body. And I love it. I'm very passionate about it. So if you ever need somebody to talk through things with, like I said, would be honored. But let's go ahead and close today's episode in prayer. So dear Lord, just thank you for today. Thank you for the ability to get back on the podcast mic and just talk openly about my opinions and my thoughts on something that is so deeply personal and affects so many women. I just ask for healing and guidance over whoever's listening who either has a diagnosis of PCOS or PMOS or is just not feeling good in their body and not feeling confident in their body, and just pray for healing over them and that you just protect their hearts and their minds as they work through this, that they just feel supported throughout the process, that they don't feel alone, and that you just continue to guide them in the right direction. I thank you for the weather and just keeping everybody safe with all the storms this last week. And again, just pray for continued safety over anyone listening to today's episode. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, so if you're interested in following along with my life outside of the podcast, you can find me at Nourish with Bailey. If you're interested in any form of one-on-one coaching, I have a couple spots opening in June for my preconception plan. As of right now, HTMA and blood work is at max capacity, but you can always message me to get on the wait list and I will try to get you in ASAP, because I know there is just such a need for a different approach, and I'm honored for anybody that I'm able to walk alongside and support them. So yeah, you can find me mostly on Instagram. That's where I'm at. So message me. My email's always in the description of each episode if you want to reach out that way. And yeah, I think that's the end of today's episode. With that, I will talk to you again in a couple Thursdays. Bye.